My name is the narrator, and I will tell you a story one hears in the half-light when streets empty and street lamps burn dimly. A story about three young people, Mickey, Lucy and Jennifer, who one cold and damp night decided to cut through the old city sewer in hopes of shortening their route and getting home before dawn. They were young, stubborn, and convinced that urban legends are just adrenaline tales. Mickey was the one to most often dare fear. Lucy stayed close, cautious and practical, and Jennifer had a quirky sense of humor that sometimes eased tension. People said that beneath the old part of town the sewer runs into a labyrinth where people lose not only their way but also themselves. And that at night something lives there that does not like to be bothered. I tell this now not as a witness but as a voice that collected their story in pieces from onlookers, dockside drifters, and old maintenance records. At first everything seemed trivial: 3 friends, a few flashlights, a map on a phone, and enough courage for an evening. They entered through a manhole in an alley where the asphalt bore patches of age, and the smell of dampness hit them immediately. Footsteps echoed on metal and wet walls, and the first minutes among rust and forgotten pipes were almost fun. Jokes, flashes of light, teasing remarks about the place feeling like a movie set. But urban legends usually contain a kernel of truth that wakes slowly and quietly. 07-0056-00 Main content: descent into the sewers, first signs of the unnatural, conflict, separation, climax, and attempts at escape. They walked through narrow passages where water barely trickled under their boots, where old graffiti and strange deep scratches ran along the walls as if someone had been clawing to climb. At first only the sound of their voices and heavy breathing accompanied them. But the deeper they went, the more it seemed the sewer was listening. Sounds began to repeat their steps, not immediately but with delay, as if someone had walked ahead and lagged a half step behind. Mickey laughed and blamed the echo and imagination. But the pattern of sound imitated not only steps but also voices, becoming increasingly lifelike. Their phone map glitched, compass needles spun, screens froze, and labels changed into words they had not typed. Lucy noticed the wall marks were not simple graffiti but torn, deep gouges arranged like a line of hands clawing. Jennifer photographed one of the inscriptions, and when they later viewed the photo, the word had altered into something else. Time began to distort. Phone clocks showed different times. Necklaces stopped and ran backward. And phrases they spoke were picked up by the water and returned with small alterations as if someone answered from behind them. Tension rose and arguments began. Mickey insisted on going on while Lucy wanted to turn back. Jennifer tried to bridge them with jokes that broke into anxious silence more often. In a narrow passage they entered a chamber where the water was higher and continuing required descending along a rusty chute. There they found a thing that should not have been there: a nearly intact child's toy whose glass eyes stared into nothing. The toy reminded them of homes above, and in that instant they all sensed that someone or something had been there before them. The first contact did not happen at once. The room simply changed its soundscape as if someone in the distance began striking metal. When Mickey carelessly knocked on the wall, the return was not an echo but an answer: 3 short knocks that did not match his. They all stopped at once, and at that moment Jennifer's flashlight flickered. When the light returned, a fresh, deep scratch had appeared on a wall as though a nail had been dragged across stone. From that moment, everything shifted. Playful nerves turned into a hunt. Their flashlights began to show shadows that did not match their forms. They saw silhouettes pass by, but the corridor remained empty when they turned. Footsteps followed them without leaving prints in the water, and the voice in the channels began to echo not only their words but their thoughts. When Lucy aloud admitted her fear of being trapped forever in the dark, a whisper returned: "Stay with us." It was both pleading and cunning, exactly what they feared. an invitation that felt like a trap. Panic grew. They tried to go back, but the passageways changed. The route they had come by was closed. Lucy spotted an arrow on the wall they had not seen before and decided to follow it, convinced it would lead to the exit. Mickey protested but eventually agreed. Their steps hastened, water rising to ankle height, and in the damp dark visions appeared, not painful but sudden images of other people's lives, unknown faces. Voices speaking into emptiness, the laughter of children long gone. Jennifer remembered the city park of her childhood and for a second felt earth under her feet, but the feeling was false. The sewer seemed to feed on their memories, extracting warmth and replacing it with a cold rustle. They came into a large chamber whose vaults rose so high the flashlight beams were swallowed by haze. In the center stood an old well wrapped in rusty chains, and around it inscriptions were arranged like a ritual circle. At the bottom of the well something coiled that appeared alive. The drawings spoke of those who came before and never returned, names carved into stone and dates that could not belong to the living. Then their paths split. In the chamber, Mickey heard a voice calling his name. The voice had a familiar tone, slightly warped, convincing him that if he descended he would find a route closer to the surface. Lucy felt resistance, but Mickey, caught between fear and hope, slipped into a narrow tunnel leading downward. Jennifer grabbed his hand but he wrenched free and vanished into the dark. His scream echoed and then cut off, and silence thickened. The two remaining, Lucy and Jennifer, rushed after him with the terrified realization that any step might be their last. They moved aimlessly, turning where hope seemed to point, yet the corridors kept reshaping. Despite fear, Lucy kept rationality. She tried leaving marks, scrapes on walls, thread from clothing, to trace their way back. Threads tore and scuffs later appeared foreign, as if someone else had passed and erased their trail. Jennifer tried to maintain conversation, recalling small shared memories, but her voice often broke as if the air itself had thickened and hindered breath. Time unmoored. Seconds stretched into minutes, minutes into hours. They found rooms where old family photos hung. In some pictures a faint motion could be perceived, as if someone had been photographed then vanished. Jennifer found a wet, darkened notebook with an entry, "Do not go further. They hear." Ink blurred and ran away. Still they pressed on because retreat seemed impossible. Their flashlights repeatedly guided them to new stretches. Occasionally they found tracks, older shoe prints, which gave hope that others had escaped. But hope shrank when those tracks formed a circle around a seating area, as if someone had hosted new arrivals. The night walk became a test of endurance and will. Whispers grew clearer and sometimes called their names, sometimes pulled out hidden memories. When Lucy thought of a brother she had not seen in years, a voice in the pipes answered, "Bring him." The word was not a demand in the ordinary sense but an offer: trade memories for freedom. Burdened by choice, each thought spoken or only hushed became part of a pact with the unknown. Approaching a long tunnel, the air cooled and a thick oily mist pooled. Lucy and Jennifer walked hand in hand and a figure materialized before them. It was incomplete, part shadow, part illusion, bearing human form without a face. It did not move, but its presence felt heavy like submerged metal. Jennifer tried to speak, but words stuck in her throat. The figure leaned and a sound like leaves whispered on the wall. Words formed that seemed to be theirs. "Why did you come?" Lucy answered, "We just wanted to get home faster." The figure replied with stone silence. The path then split finally. One branch led upward to a faint and distant light, the other plunged down into absolute dark where deep phrases surfaced. Suddenly a metallic screech came from above and Mickey appeared at an exit. Altered, his steps were slow and his gaze empty. He was no longer quite the same person who had entered the sewer. His face wore a mask not of material but of expression, a smile that read like a bad joke. Lucy ran to him and embraced him, but he recoiled as if the touch hurt him. "We must not leave," Mickey said in a voice that was not only his. He passed by and vanished into the fog. Jennifer and Lucy lost their bearings. They tried to follow, but the corridors toyed with them. Whenever they thought they saw his silhouette, he was gone down another branch. The sewer ceased to be merely a place and became something aware, dwelling among pipes and vaults. If at first they thought the legend mere tale, now the legend whispered in their ears. 56:0070:00 Conclusion, final escape attempts and a closing twist. In the last hours, reality and fiction braided. Exhausted and terrified, Lucy and Jennifer chose to mark their trail and wait for dawn if they could not find the surface, hoping the waking city would notice them. They found a musty chamber where the accumulation of time lay like powder on the floor and decided to shelter there. Lucy pulled the phone battery they had left and tried to call, but interference turned sounds into screams, and at one point a voice in the pipes said, "We are listening." Jennifer clapped her hands to her ears, but the sound that pierced was not purely physical. It invaded thought. She saw an image of a door with a number that matched her grandmother's house, and in that image lay a promise of warmth and safety. The promise was a lure. Risking it, they followed the sense of a door and suddenly found themselves on a stairway leading upward. The light above was dim but genuine, and someone called out, "Hey! Are you okay?" A worker clearing the exit hatch shouted. Lucy ran, pulled a lever, and the manhole opened to cold morning air. Hands hauled them up, and for a moment it seemed over. They breathed air and felt the sun's warmth on damp faces. The story did not offer a tranquil path home. Mickey stood by the hatch with empty eyes and the same unnatural smile. He did not explain how he reached the opening, and no one claimed his tale as straightforward truth. They emerged into a city that carried on. Cars, pedestrians, dogs, and old residents who believed sewer sounds were just sewer sounds at night. Jennifer, not wanting to forget, took a photo and sent a message, "We're okay." But when she checked the image, there were 4 silhouettes, not 3, and a caption, "Thanks for the company." In that moment a joking sense of festivity returned, but with a knowledge that something had remained below and now knew the way up. Lucy noticed tiny scrapes she had made along the way disappearing from her palm, as if someone erased the chance to return and forget. They tried to tell the tale to others, but words wore away, and listeners treated it as a fragment of local lore. I, telling you this now, cannot definitively say whether they all survived intact, because memory and fear hold gaps. Mickey came back, but the one who stepped out was not entirely who he had been. Jennifer and Lucy carried with them the smell of dampness and a thin thought. Somewhere in the dark arteries of the city something lives that likes to hear the footsteps of those brave enough to look into its heart. If you ever hear a manhole creak at night, if you feel someone walking the wrong way through water, remember this story and choose whether to go on or turn back while light remains, while streets are under your feet, while someone still watches the world as it was before you descended. The end.